Well, great, everyone. Thanks for being here today on this holiday weekend as we remember those who have fallen in uniform. There's a number of other activities going on around the state, recognizing those that are on the front line right now, working in medical facilities, and so we'll see how much folks venture out. I am heading south to Jekyll Island, so I will be down there for the weekend and meeting with the director of the Georgia or Jekyll Island Authority. We're going to just have a social distance meeting in his driveway. I'm going to sit in my car. So we'll do that. I've got my mask, so lest you worry.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. But let's get started. Crystal, good to see you today on the call, and Becky, you guys are so faithful. Charlotte, great having you on the call, and Julian, of course, our fearless organizer, and James Marlowe. I guess James on the call. James, are you there? I'm assuming you're there.
Yes, I'm here. I'm just not on video today.
Yeah. So thanks for being here today. Julian, we had talked about kind of a run of show today. Remind me of where we wanted to go with that. You're muted. You're muted, Julian, sorry. Go ahead.
Senior moment. I think you said you wanted to start out with an update on the solar decommissioning, didn't you?
Yeah, please. Yeah, let's have that from either you or Jamie. It'd be great.
I think Jamie will be the one to handle that.
Oh, really? Oh, well, Commissioner, you should have it in your inbox. Basically, let me get to the front. We broke this report or this update up into a couple of little areas, but of course, the first part, we kind of talk about the typical solar farms on private land. And then we provide legislative and state activity that is going on across the country. Not that we're encouraging it, because we're not. And then we talk about the Georgia Model Ordinance. Commissioner Shaw had asked, I have let him look at it. He wanted me to add in the South Georgia Regional Commission model ordinance, which requires a decommissioning plan. And that's pretty much the extent. And then we talk about recycling, which is kind of what the model ordinance says, that all materials that can be recycled need to be recycled. And then our conclusion, which I definitely want your input on, is basically saying, the landowners, the counties need to address it through decommissioning plans, and that Georgia has a well-positioned recycle and disposal with existing infrastructure. And as the quantity increases, we see there's going to have to be a coordinated statewide effort. So, but Julian, you definitely add some to it as well, because some of the technical pieces, Julian's very familiar with the recycling of aluminum and different materials.
Kind of the bottom line conclusion that we had after looking into all the different chemistries and technologies used is that there is really nothing that is considered hazardous waste in any of the solar panels out there. Even the panels that have cadmium in them, the cadmium's in a form where it does not readily dissolve, so it does not fail what we call the toxicity characteristic leaching procedure test. So by EPA definitions, it's just simply solid waste. In a nutshell, the cheapest way and easiest way to dispose of panels is landfilling at about $1 a panel. If you really want to recover the aluminum by shredding, which is what I shared a few sessions ago, it's going to cost you at least $10 a panel just to recover a little bit of aluminum. So really boils down to economics.
What's that aluminum worth on a panel? If it's $10 a panel, what's the aluminum worth?
That's the net cost after factoring the value of the aluminum.
Oh,
yeah.
So it costs $10 a panel. Does that count trucking it somewhere?
That would be at the disposal location. If
So
you were
you
out,
gotta-
if you were out west, I saw a pricing from a company in Nevada that was charging more like $25 a panel, probably reaping the benefits of California's landfill ban. They were right on the California border.
Wow. So California can't landfill it, is that right?
As I remember, they've banned solar panels completely from landfills.
So all of the California panels are getting on a truck and going out of state. Are they repurposing any landfill, any panels there in any way?
I did not find anything to that effect, no.
Yeah, Commissioner, we didn't really look at it. I mean, we looked generally what's going on across the country, but I didn't focus on California per se. I know that one of either John or Tim pulled up something that said a lot of California was going to other states because of their declaration of what, I don't know if it was hazardous waste, Julian, or whatever it was, but we kind of have a chart in there, other states, and we're kind of look more in Georgia. And kind of based on what James was telling us that, you know, this is not a huge issue. When we were looking at kind of within Georgia, are we going to have the infrastructure to recycle these panels or reuse? And we actually encourage reuse, just kind of like you said. But if there's anything you want us to add, once you look at it, we will. But, you know, California has a much stricter designation, and we kind of cover that in the back, and we're not, you know, Georgia does not have that. So I don't think we're going to have those issues.
I didn't really dig that far into what California is doing because they tend to be an outlier and do things their own way.
Yeah, I want to run this past Stephen Bradley and Keith Mask over at Cox Conserves and see what idea they have. They're really about the only private company recycling tires that they use. So they've got I guess they've got a heart to take care of everything that they, you know, that they use. So 80,000 tires, you know, on all their vehicles. And so they want to make sure that they dispose the equivalent of 80,000 tires in the most responsible way, which is pyrolysis. So I just want to see what they think about the best way to dispose of a solar panel.
Okay. Yeah, because in the report, it's got that California designated as, let's see right here, restrictive waste designations. And so that's the issue in California, which we don't have, but there's 2 other states that do the same thing. And all of those have very high renewable portfolio standards. California, Washington, Vermont, and Hawaii all are doing that, have those designations.
I can't imagine taking 1,000 acres of solar panels in Taylor County and any landfill being able to accommodate that amount of material without filling it up. I mean, if it's landfills usually aren't 1,000 acres. So if you've got 1,000 acres worth of panels and pylons, those pylons, they're going down into the ground. I mean, they may be 14 feet long. So you got to have the panels, the racking, and the pylons that are holding the racking system in the ground. And those things are, you know, that big around. And they're pile driving those things or using the can't sink ones that kind of screw into the ground. I just can't.
The pylons and the racking are completely recyclable. That's steel and aluminum. When I was referring to landfilling, it's just the panels themselves.
Okay.
And other than the aluminum frame, the panels tend to be very thin.
Mm-hmm.
So, Tim, all those materials, you know, have recyclability. And I did find a company this week that I was not able to speak with directly, an Arizona-based company that does recycling around the country, and that, you know, the recycling industry will change as that supply increases. But right now, I mean,
Yeah.
a couple of comments you're going to always hear me say. First of all, as a conservationist, that's, you know, a big part of why I do what I do. I want to see as much material as possible recycled. I mean, at Radiance, we used to recycle the styrofoam in the inverter boxes. So, I mean, we would try to do whatever we could. But a lot of people that are bringing these issues up, they're not talking about recycling, you know, Walmart facilities or other businesses. So they're doing it as a delaying tactic, as a, you know, an anti-solar tactic. And, you know, they're solving a problem that's not really a real problem. A solar panel is about the same thickness as a sheet of plywood. So despite the fact it's a large surface area in a large solar farm, it's not as much material as you might think. I mean, it's significant, but it's not a, you know, not a huge mass relative to the acreage that it's covered.
Yeah, and Commissioner, I think if you when you read through it, you're going to see that this network is not yet set up because we don't have the volume, but it could easily become the cheapest disposal. And I mean, and I think that's what the ordinance wants is recycling. And so I think what we're saying is currently is cheaper to landfill, but that's not necessarily saying in 20 years that would be the cheapest.
Well, Commissioner, you brought up a suggestion the first time that we discussed this of reusing the panels as a building material, and we ended up highlighting that as probably one of the best options. I mean, if you're giving away building material that's got good structural integrity, I would think that some farmers and rural landowners would find some pretty inventive uses for it.
How much insulation capability does a panel have? If you strip the aluminum away and then you put it up against a sheet of foam board for insulation, is there any repurposing there? No?
Not really. I think the fact that it's waterproof and hailproof and stormproof, that's the best virtues that it has.
I see.
And it does create shade, of course.
Julian, did you tell them about the like the printable panels that I sent you? The ones made in Australia, like the printable.
I never looked further into that because we've been kind of busy on this project. But Crystal had found a new panel technology that's being pioneered in Australia, where they are, I believe it's 3D printing of the conductive ink, as I remember.
Got like conductive ink, and they can print it basically on like conventional printers. So you can like turn regular printers into this type of printer by just using this ink and then putting it on really thin laminate, and you can actually roll it. It's like really durable. Apparently it's really cheap. It's about $10 a square meter. And Julian, I showed them that, and right now I looked it up. They're in commercial trials in Australia with it. So I don't know how far into that it is, but apparently it's doing really well. And it's holding up really well in like cloud coverage, and it can even pick up some stuff they said from the moonlight, like when the moon's out. It's really, really well. And he had mentioned something like that'd be good to take and put over panels that aren't good anymore. And rather than just like trashing them, you know, put this thin sheet over it and like use the same existing hardware, you know, from the like recyclable panel, you know, and just basically just covering it with this sheet of plastic, this new solar panel almost. But I don't know where it's at now as far as like commercially being done.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so you would just leave the panels up there. I think what's going to happen in some of these situations with landowners, particularly in South Georgia, that are taking timberland, existing timberland, and converting it to solar, when they lose their PPA in 20 years or 25 years, and they don't get another one, if that happens, then they may say, man, it's time to grow trees again on this property, and we need to clear it, and we need to, go ahead and grow trees. And so they wouldn't want to invest any additional money in solar, possibly, and would just want to, utilize the land in some other way. So, I mean, I don't know. We don't know what the price of solar is going to be in 20 years and what our state's energy grid is going to look like. I think it's going to be think there's going to be a lot of batteries out there. We make solar even more attractive. So,
Well, Commissioner, if it's any indication, we had a meeting with Georgia Power Thursday, maybe yesterday, and they're doing a new modeling technology. They're getting away from Strategist to Aurora, which allows them to integrate generic renewables into their mix. We're going to see a lot of solar. I'm just letting you know, at least looking at it from an energy standpoint. That's before factoring in the RCV framework, because I asked them, but they're looking at it just cost of the resource. So, and I will share that with you, but we're going to see a lot of renewables in the future.
I think James had spoken to this before too, is that I can't imagine that in 20 years, it would not make economic sense to simply put new panels on the existing supports and racking systems. You know, you've already got the foundation there. So if the latest panels are double or triple the current efficiency output, then reboot it as a new state-of-the-art solar farm for minimal infrastructure cost.
Right, and James can either confirm this or deny it, but what I keep hearing is after this 30 years that we're still looking at them producing 70% of their output. So, you know.
I mean, I'll comment on two things. One, repowering is going to be very common practice. I mean, think about it like upgrading your personal computer. I mean, you know, every technology has a life cycle, and that you're going to see these interconnections renewed. You're going to see PPAs renewed. You know, like Tim hit the nail on the head when he said there's going to be a lot of energy storage, and this is going to provide a lot of grid resiliency and very, very low cost power.
yeah, and I know James's song first and second verse is about, you know, the NIMBYs that don't want solar in their backyard, and I'm not one of those. Nobody on this call is one of those. I'm just trying to think ahead about a problem that we don't have right now and try to get commitments from people like, you know, Mark Williams, who heads up DNR, who certainly probably won't be in office in 20 years, you know. Yeah, you know, let's get mechanisms in place. Like, let's get companies that maybe aren't thinking about this, like Cox Enterprises, to maybe experiment with their own money and stand up some kind of recycling idea. Yeah, I just don't think it hurts to do that, James, to plan it. I mean, I'm not out here saying don't do more solar because you can't recycle it. I mean, that's what the opponents of nuclear power say. They say don't build nuclear power because we don't have a plan for the waste. I mean, you know, and it's true. We don't have a plan. We don't have a plan for the waste. So I just don't want to do make the same mistake, you know, with solar.
I wouldn't be surprised too I'm sorry, Becky, if we find that after 25 years, they're still performing just fine, as we found with many power generation technologies. But you've got to have a design life to start with. You've got to have a number to put on the leases and on the financing and the return on investment, et cetera. And, you know, at the end of that initial contract, you may just say, well, it's still working fine, so let's extend it. Let's extend the lease, let's extend the PPA for another 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Yeah. Well, in Georgia, I mean, most of the PPAs, and James, you have firsthand experience, the majority that I see are 30 years. Occasionally we'll have a 2025, but the majority are 30 years.
Becky, were you going to say something?
Yes, just about earlier in the conversation about reusing some of the panels. And I'm wondering if anyone's thought about people who have lower income housing or are caught up in homelessness, or maybe even talking with Habitat for Humanity to see if to strike up a partnership for ways that they can include some of these materials in their houses that they build around the world that, you know, could or couldn't be eked out. We had talked last time about eking out, you know, some of the solar energy from them, but also just you know, like you were saying, like affix them to foam core or plywood or something to see if it might be helpful building material that could be used for people who need it.
Spencer Fry, who's a representative in Athens and heads up Habitat there, has been wanting to do some solar on some of the Habitat bills, and we've been talking about it for about 4 years and trying to make that happen. And so I think there is an interest, in doing this. It's just, standing up I guess the stream, right, so that when, and I guess the first panels we have that have worn out are the ones that we talked about at Georgia Tech last week, auditorium, right? So those are the first ones that we know that are worn out, not counting the ones in the hurricane that were blown to bits or scratched and torn up. But so, where do we stage those, in preparation for Habitat's use? So I reach out to Habitat and just ask this question this week. Hey, do you have the warehouse capability? They don't have to be inside. Do you have a parts yard, in Americus, Georgia, where we could stack you up 500 panels that could be used? And then, of course, I guess we've got to have inverters and the racking and some other things. James, can I ask you a question? Is solar racking proprietary to the panel, or are the racks generic and will handle any panel?
They will handle most panels. They're more of a universal design, but I wouldn't encourage using the panels from Georgia Tech on Habitat. I mean, those panels were, installed essentially in 1995 before the Olympics. So it's a very old technology. It's very, it's half the efficiency of a modern panel. The surface area of a Habitat roof is fairly small. I mean, I've done a Habitat house. I'd love to see Habitat incorporate that, but I want to see that Habitat house have a, state-of-the-art panel that's going to last for the life of that home as well. So, I do think that panels are repurposable, but, doing it on Habitat with Georgia Tech panels, not something I would recommend.
Certainly something like MARTA did at Laredo, just putting a canopy over the buses, you do get the residual impact of not having hot buses, and having less diesel fuel or natural gas in this case to cool them down. So I mean, there is some shade benefit and value to doing a parking lot array. James, how expensive would it be to put an array in a parking lot of used panels? Is it just worth it because of the cost of the engineering and the poles and all of that?
So you are beginning to see a lot more parking canopies, both on top of parking decks with long span array supports, and like Quest, which the example is the one we built over at the Atlanta Falcons Mercedes-Benz. But really, when you're building that, you think of it like this: you're building a building. It doesn't have any walls or doors, but you have a lot of steel. You have foundations. They are the most expensive mounting technique for mounting solar. The lowest cost would be a large MARTA rooftop with standing seam roof, like they have over in kind of near where Sweetwater is. But building canopies, is not inexpensive. And, typically if you do build a canopy, you want to use a more efficient solar panel because you're buying more steel in order to put it up there. So a more efficient panel requires less surface area and less steel and less foundation.
Yeah, we're striking out here in every way here. So, okay, maybe to take away, I'm going to read the report this weekend. you know, while I'm at Jekyll, and I will get back with you on Tuesday, and we'll talk with Cox Enterprises and see what they have to say. And I also want to talk with Commissioner Mark Williams
Yeah.
and see what he thinks as he's
I
heading.
mean, Tim, I'll give you two quick comments. One is Cox did relocate some solar panels from an installation in Macon, Georgia, when they sold the building to their headquarters. So that's an example of repurposing that made a lot of sense. You know, I mean, one of the things that we do continue to need is, you know, really more flexibility from the utilities on siting, because there are bad sites. There are sites that you're trying to put solar where it would be better put somewhere else. And the industry and the utilities need to work together to create policies that allow that. But unfortunately, a lot of the Georgia power policies have given you no flexibility on relocating. And there's been cases where people had multiple sites, but because of the lottery in the early years of the bid process, they've been completely inflexible on moving to other sites that might have more desirable attributes, less minuses, maybe better environmentally. So more flexibility from the utility would be about as useful on siting as anything else.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea. Okay, anything else on the solar decommissioning thoughts? All right, why don't we go to Crystal for an update at Georgia Gwinnett on the car sharing?
Oh, yes. I applied for that fellowship. I'm waiting to hear back. I got the letter of recommendation I needed, and I drew up a proposal and my resume and sent it. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe we'll get it. I feel like if I got that kind of behind me, working as like a mechanism, I guess, in kind of sorts, it'd be hard for the administration to say no, you know? At least let me give it a go, I'm thinking. That's as far as I've gotten with that. Summer semester just started, so it's taking like days to hear back from my professors. I guess they're kind of swamped with stuff. I know I got swamped with stuff, so, but that's all I've heard about that so far. I haven't moved forward. I know like the sustainability committee is like gone this summer so far, and they'll be back in September.
Would you remind us again about the fellowship and what's involved with it?
Oh, the RCC fellowship. Yeah, it's basically it's a fellowship. It's gonna, like, if you get it, they offer you $2,000 stipend to help you with work. Basically, you work over the course of the academic year on your campus on some kind of project or campaign in sustainability on the campus, like bringing sustainability to the campus. So like all types of projects like that. I just drew up the one that we had been talking about with the EV rideshare for like the dorms and stuff. Is the proposal that I gave. It's the one I used. I don't necessarily know if they're gonna like that or if that's what's gonna go with it. I don't know, it could change, but basically if you get it, you start off in August. There's like a weekend, they send you to Washington, DC, you get some training from the people there, the RCC upper class people there, and then you work with them over the course of the year, like getting back in touch with them. Something about publishing your work afterwards, like in their site. So I'm thinking, I don't know, that looks good. I thought like maybe Georgia Gwinnett might like that as well. You know, kind of get their name out there. It looks good. Hey, look, you're doing this, sustainability. So I mean, I'm hoping I'm lining all these things up. So hopefully it makes it easier for them to say yes.
So we need to be thinking about getting you a used electric car that will be your first guinea pig out there. Is that kind of?
Yeah, I'm trying to, if I can get them to be like, I've already got like, you know, 2 from the sustainability committee saying that they support this, you know, and they think they can get the rest of the committee to support this. So I'm hoping like if they say, yes, go forward with it. And if I have this thing behind me, because it's a student project, they said that the administration would be much more acceptable receiving of it if it was like a student project rather than one of their crazy ideas that they bring to them. I was like, I understand that completely. I was trying to get them to like basically say yes and see what they do in the fall. And yeah, then I'm gonna need a I'll need to procure some used EVs, I imagine.
So, is there any way that you could talk with the fleet superintendent or the fleet manager at Georgia Gwinnett this summer to, just to let him know you've applied for this and that you wanted to do a little bit of homework this summer to find out what would be the challenges of school being donated this car, and would it be insured under their policy, or would it need to be under some separate entity like Zipcar? And just to, I know that's going to be a question that you're asked, and it'd be good to know if it would be legal for someone to donate the state of Georgia a car. And I know that sounds silly that the state may not take something free, but I think there's a possibility that the state would say, no, we have to have a procedure to be able to procure an asset. We just can't receive the asset. So I think you just need to ask the question now, get back to us on a future call, because that could be a roadblock for us.
Right, and see if it's even doable, because, I mean, I think they've got 1 or 2 Leaf vehicles that they have, and it's for like guests who come to speak there. I think professors can use it, but it's, I think, more or less for like guests, speakers at the place to use and drive around while they're visiting there. I'm not sure like what kind of insurance policy they use on it, but I think it would be different for students. These are younger people in a dorm. I mean, there's like some kind of I'm sure there's some kind of like registration and approval they would have to go through, they'd have to have a driver's license, valid driver's license. I'm sure they'd have to be somehow, I don't know. That was a big step I was already seeing coming up in the near future. So the fleet manager, you said?
Yeah, the school's going to own some equipment, right, that have wheels on them. Maybe some of those golf carts, maybe there's a work truck. All of those things that are assets that are owned by the school, I really think they probably have a Georgia government tag on them, and they're actually owned by the state of Georgia. They were just kind of assigned to Georgia Gwinnett. Just like the car I used to drive here was owned by the state of Georgia, insured by the state of Georgia. It had a tag, that had a GV on it for government, and the repairs were paid for through the state of Georgia fleet policy and then billed back to our agency. So I'm guessing that what Georgia Gwinnett has is vehicles that are owned by the state of Georgia that they're paying for the fuel and for the repairs. And so if we were able to get a car donated to use, let's say, Chevy Bolt, since the state doesn't buy Bolts, he gave them a Bolt. How is it? I mean, who's going to sign off on the title, and how's all that going to happen? I just feel like you need to do some homework on that, because if they say there's no mechanism in place, then we just need to come up with a plan B. So maybe that plan B is that Zipcar idea of having Zipcar own it, and have the students have subscriptions to it. So maybe if you could just do the research on those 2 things this summer. What was the Zipcar history on campus? Because you said they were there earlier, right?
They were there before, and let's see, the professor said she doesn't know exactly why they left, but they're not even in the city anymore. Like they said, they weren't in Lawrenceville. But I didn't go research that myself. That's just something that she had informed me of. So I don't know if they're still not in Lawrenceville or why they left in the first place. That was something I have to look more into.
I think the fleet manager would know this. If not, the police chief at Georgia Gwinnett probably would know it. So I think you just make a trip to the campus, and the police are going to be there. They're still working. So you could ask the police chief. I've met him before. I can't remember his name. And then fleet manager is probably on the Georgia Gwinnett website under staff.
Okay.
Finding them. Plan C, there's a guy named John Lewis that works for this charity called Airborne Servants, Airborne with an H. And they provide, it's airborneservants.org, I believe. Maybe Becky can check it while I'm talking. But they provide moms who qualify with a free car. So they get, like, we're donating a Prius to them all, and Prius works just perfectly fine. It's an older one, but they will do any repairs that the Prius needs, then donate that to a single mom, and the repairs will be made by one of their 4 auto shop partners. So people that donate their, pro bono, say, 15 hours worth of mechanic work per month. And so, it might be possible that let's say that Lyft or Georgia Power donates a vehicle to Airborne Servants because it's a charity, and they do that, and then Airborne Servants through their nonprofit works somehow with you there and another entity to house the vehicle on the campus and to make that vehicle available through some kind of loaner, some kind of loaner system. So that would be yet another idea. They're working with the Winder Barrow housing project, and they're going to be providing a couple of cars at the housing project that checked out at the housing office. So, we'll see how that goes, and that's not too far from where.
Oh, that's a lot like what I'm trying to do.
So John Lewis, he's at that website. It'd be great for you to email him. I talked to him yesterday. I'm trying to get them a car donated as well, electric car. They've been doing this with Priuses. Now they want to experiment with an electric car to see if that will work. And the only couple of places I know that's done this is that Hispanic Community Center in Phoenix that I mentioned to you. Or in Portland, the Hispanic Community Center in Portland that works through Forth, F-O-R-T-H is the name of the nonprofit. And then there's one in LA, and I think it's Easy Go. I forget the name of the charity there, but they've done the loaners on the EV. So there are 2 models. And I mean, you're going to have to research this anyway. If you get the fellowship, you might as well go ahead and look into it. You could conduct an interview, that becomes essentially part of your data in your paper, since they want a paper. You could I would record the interview if I were you. And then, and then you're going to have more data when you sit down with that professor and she or he starts asking you tough questions. You can say, oh yeah, I've had the interview with Forth. I've had the interview with, with the folks in LA, and here's how it went with them. And here's how they said they would do it different. And here's based on their experiences in my conversation with the fleet manager and with this person, I think we should proceed in this direction. I mean, a professor would appreciate that kind of homework.
Right.
Anybody have another suggestion for Crystal on this as she launches? Becky or anyone?
The only thought I have is, Zipcar or, some of the other services that are out there would, be better avenues because they would take care of the maintenance. They would take care of the insurance. I mean, there are a number of elements to it that, some of those companies may have perfected, or even the rental car companies. That's all I can think of.
Yeah, most of these car sharing services, and I saw one, where was I at the other day? And I guess it was maybe here in Atlanta, a car sharing service. It wasn't Zipcar. I had not heard of the brand, but they're all over Seattle. And I mentioned to y'all the smart cars. They have the little tiny smart cars, and then they have BMWs. Two different services. They're contactless. Entry the keys in the car. You've got an account. With the service, maybe you pay for 3 hours of use per month, or you pay for 6 hours of use. That's not that expensive for those little for those little tiny cars. And so, you would log in, and the company's already got all your insurance stuff. You log into the car and you're going to drive it to McDonald's. So you're only going to use it for an hour. So you log in, you pay your $10 for the hour, and you drive your electric car to McDonald's, and you come back and you plug it into the Georgia Gwinnett charger. And so it just needs to be sitting at a charger. I think that's the main thing, is that, and Georgia Gwinnett has a few of them.
Yeah.
Maybe we use this to help them get some more.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was like. I was hoping that if they did this for like the dorms, they'd have one like at the dorms parking lot. Would be ideal.
Crystal, another thing that you might want to consider in addition to your current partnership. So like, I know you're doing with your sustainability club and you're talking to professors, but it might make sense, like when I'm doing a search for EV car shares in Georgia, it seems like Georgia Power has information, the Sierra Club is pushing this. There's an Atlanta Electric Vehicle Development Coalition. It might make sense to, especially like a Sierra Club, or I'm not trying to push Sierra Club, but just like an entity that also has like a student involvement interest. And I don't know about what the power what the utility is out there. I don't know if it's Georgia Power, or if you guys have a co-op, but it could
It's
be
Jackson EMC, I believe.
Jackson. Okay, so it might be worth a chat with Jackson, just to see if you could build like a little consortium of organizations that could also benefit from this, that could help sort of be the foundation, kind of like what James was just talking about. Like, if you all aren't allowed to purchase leafs, then you might not be allowed to insure them either. And if there's no Zipcar happening there, you might need some sort of other, infrastructural support that can, take more of the liability off of your hands, because the school's not going to want all that liability if they don't, just depending on what the commissioner said, like what their procurement is and what their fleet is like currently. So yeah, you might just want to consider reaching out to some other folks around the state who would love to see your idea flourish. And private companies in addition to, public, charities and whatnot.
Okay.
And I'd go right to Jackson Electric and see what they offer currently to their members. And if the school receives all of its electricity from Jackson Electric, that's another connection, right? That they would have an increased interest in selling more electricity to the school to power these cars. And so you're not in it alone. A lot of people want to see EVs expanded, and a campus offers this great sort of like, little beaker, like a little test tube for things. And so I think it's I'd figure out who you could partner with.
Jackson EMC is sponsoring the EV Performance Corral at Road Atlanta this year, October 14th through 17th. And I've organized it, but I got them to sponsor it. They paid $5,000 to do this to the track. And we're going to have an area that's maybe the size of, maybe 2 acres there. And it will only have allowed in it performance EV cars that fit with the race genre there. And so Porsche's going to have their Taycan there. Audi's going to have their e-tron. Tesla's going to have the new model. Is it the Model Y is coming? Model Y. And then in the middle will be a giant 5-ton solar portable canopy that Georgia Power is purchasing from Envision Solar in San Diego that has EV chargers built into it. Right now, you can't charge an EV at Road Atlanta. And so Georgia Power will bring in this 5-ton canopy on a trailer before the race festivity starts. It'll be the centerpiece of the corral, or it's another word for parking area. So the Corvettes are in an area, the Porsches are in an area, the BMWs are in an area, and we've got an area for EV performance cars. So we'll be able to park about 50 of them there. With it's going to be kind of a festive atmosphere. We're going to have volunteers. We're getting these special pit crew shirts made that are embroidered, and it's going to be kind of an EV concierge service where people that own performance cars, maybe that's never seen an electric one or considered it, they won't get to drive these cars necessarily, but they'll come in and all our volunteers will have these race shirts on, and we'll take them around to each car. They'll be able to see the canopy and the cars plugged in. Cobb EMC is a big part of it. Georgia Power is a big part of it. So it's about 100,000 people that come to this race. So, but there's never been, to my knowledge, other than one Fisker back in 2012, they've never had an electric vehicle on display. So we didn't talk them into doing it. We talked them into letting us pay them to do it. And so that's going to be a really cool thing. We're looking for volunteers. Some of you may want to be volunteers, come out and help during that. But but that's an example of how we can showcase electric vehicles and the value of doing that to people that aren't normally used to seeing them.
I was about to say, they should race them around the track once or twice.
Well, we are going to have what's called hot laps or parade laps, where everyone who pays the extra $20 to park in this area that have an electric performance car, they will, at some point during the 4-day race weekend, probably like on Wednesday afternoon or Thursday, all these cars will go out and they will do 3 laps, led around by a pace car that has a little flashing light on it. They'll go about 80 miles an hour, out there. And so that'll be a fun kind of value added thing for the people that pay to park there. And then of course, Jackson, I'll just start with my comment about Jackson. Jackson EMC is getting more interested in electric cars. And that's why I think Becky's right, Crystal, is that since they are showing more of an interest, and you've got and something that borders on a charity usage, is there a way that Jackson EMC could be engaged? Cobb EMC owns a bunch of EVs. They loan them to their members to test out. So this isn't far from doing that because insurance is involved. So maybe check out the Cobb EMC website as well about their electric car loaner program. Anything else for Crystal on this topic today?
Crystal, I dropped a bunch of links in there if any of that is helpful. Just kind of as the commissioner was talking when he told me to start looking stuff up, I just started looking at stuff up. He would say a word and I would go find it. So I hope they're helpful.
Yes.
All right, well, we've got about 5 minutes left. Julian, you gave the report on decommissioning, but didn't you have another project you were going to give a short report on?
I did want to talk about district cooling, but that's going to be like its own topic in itself. And as you had suggested, I think we should wait for our friend at Con Ed in New York, wait for his availability so that we've got a guest expert to comment on that.
So we set this up. Let's set this up for next time. Jamie, you remember maybe it was 2 Decembers ago, I was up in New York meeting
Yes.
a guy named Ragu.
Mhm.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
And Ragu was talking about their non-wires program that they were introducing, and those was these ice cooling. Julian, describe what it is.
Basically, what they're doing, it's not actually district cooling. That applies to multiple buildings. They're working with individual buildings, large buildings, who will put large chillers and ice tanks in their basement and use nighttime off-peak pricing to freeze the ice, and then cut their peak load and use the ice during the day.
Didn't Ragu say there were about 5 high rises doing that in Brooklyn?
He said somewhere around that number. He said several.
So we're going to have him on next time, Lord willing, as well as, who was the other guy? Julian, didn't we find one other guy that had some expertise on this?
Well, we've got the folks in Austin Power, and Chicago had come up. Somebody knew someone in Chicago who had worked on their district cooling. I don't remember who that was.
You know, I am fascinated by this, and you know, obviously getting Georgia Power to do it, you know, it's going to require some kind of pilot. They probably always dread Echols' pilot projects as we approach the integrated resource plan, because I'm always coming up with harebrained ideas that I want to try, and we wind up, you know, some of them wind up working, some don't. Like the wind project I put in 2013 never materialized. We couldn't. We started working on the foundation on Skidaway Island and realized the soil was too loose. We couldn't. It was going to cost $1 million to go deep enough just to keep that turbine not from shaking, and so it didn't work. And fortunately, our ratepayers didn't have to pay for it. Georgia Power just ate the cost of it. But some things work and some things don't.
Well, we've got a couple minutes left, so if I could plant a seed of an idea and we can come back to it, I can do a quick screen share here. Everybody see that? Mm-hmm. That is the central cooling plant for Atlantic Station. It serves all of their commercial buildings. Mm-hmm. So you see Veolia Energy, they are actually a private utility for Atlantic Station. That building presumably houses all the chillers, and you see the cooling towers at the top. And all you need to do is add ice storage to that, and we can shift the load, the entire load of Atlantic Station to nighttime power. And that would offset the loads of new buildings that are being built in Midtown. So we have a very specific target for trying to advance this idea.
Yeah, did I introduce you to Jason Byer from Did he say he had a connection to that friend or that Viola or whoever?
His comment is that he didn't think that they had time of use pricing available to them. Without that, you can't. There's no financial incentive to shift your load to nighttime power.
And retail's not really interested in time of use. I mean, they're busy in the afternoon. they're not going to want to throttle back like industry would. But there are different tariffs that they could go on. But
But if you have plenty of ice to get you through the hot part of the day, then you don't have to throttle back. It's just
That's
a matter
true.
of having enough storage.
that's true. That would allow you to go on time of use. Yeah.
And something I've alluded to you before yesterday in our call, I touched on it briefly, is using phase change materials instead of water ice, which increases the density of the energy storage.
All right, well, let's save this for next time. We'll try to have some experts on. You guys have a great Memorial Day weekend. I'm heading to Jekyll, so catch me on the socials. I'll be running around looking for sea turtle nests and having fun. So
Have a good
But-
time.
Have
and
fun.
perhaps we could say that our next date will be tentative based on when Raghu from New York is available to join
yeah,
us.
let's do it in a couple weeks. That'd be great.
Okay, thanks everybody.
All right,
All right,
bye y'all.
thanks. See
ya.
everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Have fun at Chuckle.
Thank you.